Hello and welcome to the FSF Podcast. I am Tim. I am your host, and this is the show that is made by nerds for nerds. So, welcome to the Nerdatorium. Our guest today is an actor that's known for both his on-screen and his theater acting. Now, you've seen him on shows like Severance, Daredevil, Born Again, Russian Dolls, Katie Keene, The Eric Andre Show, and there's a whole bunch more out there that we could talk about. But I'm very excited to be able to welcome Marc Geller to the show today. Welcome to the show, Marc.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be in the Nerdatorium.
Exactly. All right. You answered it properly. We get to move along. All right. So one of the first things that we always do with our guests on this show, Marc, is because we are nerds and it's self-proclaimed and we wear it as a badge of honor. We like to know the origin stories, the backgrounds of our heroes. And today you are the hero of the story.
Okay.
So in the story of Marc Geller, how did you get here? What made you decide, I want to be an actor, I want to be an entertainer?
It started when I was about 8, I guess. I grew up in Rhode Island, which, if people don't know, is the smallest state of the United States. And when I was 9, I believe, I saw in the local paper that a children's theater school was opening in Massachusetts, which is the neighboring state, but Rhode Island is so small that you can get there in a half hour. And I asked my parents if I could go there, and they said yes, and were very supportive. And I ended up going to that school for 5 years, I believe it was, and then did a lot of community theater and local theater and all that kind of thing. No one in my family was in any way in the arts, so I'm not quite sure where it came from. I just knew from when I was 7 or 8 years old that's what I wanted to do. And when I was 18, I moved to New York, and then I started acting professionally, and here I am now.
Okay. So as far as inspiration goes, so if it didn't come from the family, was there an outside influence other than you seeing this advertisement for something that was, in another state? Was there a show or a movie or something where you went, man, that'd just be really cool to be part of?
Well, it actually started before the school. A couple of years before going to the school, I was already interested, and I was putting on little plays in school and things like that. But no, there really wasn't an inspiration. My father, when I was about 8, brought me to New York to see a Broadway show. And then when I was 9, he brought me to see another Broadway show. So that could quite possibly have been the influence. I'm not sure. The weird thing about that was, when I was 8, he brought me to see Fiddler on the Roof on Broadway,
Okay.
which starred no, it wasn't Zero Mostel at that point. It was Herschel Bernardi and Maria Karnalova, who I think I may be mispronouncing her name. It's either Karnalova or Karnalova. Anyway, the next year, when he brought me back to see Zorba, it starred Herschel Bernardi and Maria Karnalova. And I thought at that age that there was one group of people who did a play on Broadway every year, and it was the same cast, and there was one show that played, and just
I can see why you would think that. Yeah, if you
the leads were the
went
same
this
people.
time. Yeah, well, yeah. What are the chances, right?
I didn't know there were any other shows. I wasn't given a choice of what I was going to see, so I assumed that was the show I was playing.
Oh, well, hey, look, they just picked a new story. All right, very cool. Yeah, no, that actually makes a whole lot of sense. I can see that.
Bizarre.
That would be, yeah, it is a little bizarre.
But bizarrely, one of the leads in Zorba when I was 9 was an actress named Lorraine Sarabian, who I've since worked with and become friendly with. So that's kind of full circle.
Oh, that is kind of cool. All right. So yeah, but I could see how that would be very influential, inspirational to a young man, especially if in 2 different times you're going there, and that could be a nice influence and point you towards something. So I could see how that could be part of the inspirational, influential story of Marc Geller, how you got started. Okay.
That was pretty much my only introduction to the arts at that age at all that I remember.
Okay. Fair enough. All right. So let's talk about the difference between theater work and on-camera work. Now, we've had several guests over the years who not only have done both, but who continue to do both because they like having both the experience of the live audience and they like the experience of working on set, working for certain directors and things along those lines. So one of the things I love about this show, Mark, is it allows me to talk to people about why they do what they do. And that's why I asked that first question, because it helps me to kind of get to know you a little bit better, know what your inspirations were, what your inclinations are for wanting to do different things. But what I also love to find out about is what your preparation process is and how you prepare for what you're doing. Because although it's the same task, it's handled differently with on screen and on theater. So what is your process for each? Do you have a different process for each when it comes to how you prepare your theater work and your on-screen work?
Well, it's weird because they're completely different and totally the same at the same time. It's really true. They're almost like two different jobs, yet they're identical. Obviously, everything on screen, on TV and film is much, much smaller and pretty much all in your eyes. And, the camera
Mhm.
picks up everything. The camera doesn't lie. On stage, obviously, things have to be bigger. People have to hear you. People have to see what you're doing. So they're very different in that way, but very much the same in the fact that they both need to be truthful and come from somewhere real. In terms of preparation, I don't do tons of preparation. It really depends on the part. The first preparation is memorizing the dialogue, which for some shows can be a huge task. Not as difficult for film and television because you film in small segments, and you can redo it if you get it wrong. On stage you have to do the whole thing every night, and you only get to do it once. So, but if you're playing, a real person or historical person, obviously there's, more research and preparation involved in that. But if you're creating something that hasn't been done before, or you're, redoing something that's, totally imaginary, then from my point of view, there's less preparation. I always like to figure out what a character looks like and what a character sounds like and how a character walks, things like that, and go from there.
Okay.
A lot of people start from the inside and go out. I start from the outside and go in.
Okay. That's it. I find that interesting. You talked about even down to the walk. Why is that so important for you?
If I know how someone moves, and again, more so for theater than for film and television, because more of your body, you can see my entire body the entire time. Whereas in film and television, if it's on your face, it may not be as important. But I don't know. It's feeling comfortable, I guess, in the character's skin, just knowing how they move, knowing. I really can't be too much clearer than that because I don't even know that I understand myself.
No, that's fine. Like I said, for me, it's a point of interest of knowing how and why somebody does something as part of their process, part of their preparation. Because I've heard of a couple other people who talk about gaining the motivation for their character from the outside in and learning about them, about their movements and everything. But I think the more prevalent form, I think, is the opposite direction, going from the character's origins and feelings and all those things, and then going to the outside and everything else. But I also have the mindset of, hey, whatever gets you there and gets the job done.
I try not to dissect it too much because I don't really want to know. I'm afraid I'll ruin it if I dissect it too much. I've been doing it for a long time, so I just do what I do, and hopefully it works.
Fair enough. Okay. So, having been an actor that's worked on theater projects, and you've worked behind in front of a camera and all these different things, is there a project out there that, and I'm thinking this is probably going to go more towards the line of the theater, but hey, maybe I'm wrong. Is there a project out there that you wish more people had seen you in or knew that you were part of, that you're like, hey, this is some of my best work, check this out?
Just in terms of projects in general, in 2023, I did a production at Arena Stage in Washington, D.C. called Ride the Cyclone that was very successful and was extended, and there was talk of it coming to Broadway. I really wish it had come to New York and more people had seen. A lot of people did see it in D.C., but I wish a lot more people had seen it in New York. I think it was a really stellar production of the show. So, but it didn't.
Okay. All right. I always like asking that question as well. Again, it's finding out, for me, more about you as a person. And then sometimes if it's something that is on video, I'm like, oh, well, I'll go watch that and check it out. So just kind of curious.
Yeah.
All right. Um, all right. So now at some point we're at that point where we need at least mention Severance and your character Kier on that show. Now, and if I read properly, one of your auditions said that you were, or one of the interviews I saw with you said that your audition was in two parts, one to be the face and one to be the voice.
Yeah. When I first met with them, it was just to be the face of Kier. He originally was just slated to be one picture, basically. And I've said, and I could be wrong, I assume it was probably the picture in MDR because that one's always there, but I could be wrong about that. But that's what the original audition was going to be. That turned into, after I was cast, that turned into a lot more pictures and, sculptures and statues and things. And then about 6 months after I was cast, the casting people contacted my agent because they were going to start to do some voiceovers for Kier as well, and wanted to know if I wanted to audition to be my own voice because they had cast me really to be a face. So I guess they wanted to make sure I sounded right too. So I recorded some things for them and sent them in, and they said, yes, he'll work fine as a voice too. So that's how I became the voice.
Okay. It's just an interesting process to me. I whenever I think of being cast for something, I'm like, oh, well, yeah, if they cast you, you're going to be the voice as well. That just makes sense to me. But, I didn't think about,
And normally that would be the case, but because their entire focus was on what he looked like when they were casting me originally, the voice wasn't really a huge concern to them at that point.
Wasn't critical at that stage. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay. So let's take a little turn into more of the story of Severance itself. And like I told you in the beginning, we're not a deep lore dive podcast. I'm not going to ask you about the motivations of the character and why you did what you did, and why did you say the things that the writer said that you should say. But
in terms of Severance, it would be a short conversation because my character's dead. So
yeah, he is dead. Yes. But all right. So what attracted you to the Severance project?
The same thing that attracted me to every project. It was work. I knew nothing about it. It wasn't even called Severance. It had a code name. I didn't know what I was even auditioning for.
Oh, okay.
I knew that Ben Stiller was directing it. I knew that Dan Erickson had written it. I knew that it was being done by Apple, and I knew what they were looking for, but I knew nothing else about it.
Really? That's interesting. Okay.
At that point, no one knew anything else about it.
Okay. All right. Well, let's change this next question up a little bit then, because then with that answer, that's something reading that next question, but we can change it a little bit. I'll be fine. I can adapt. I can move.
You can ask it the way you wrote it. I can adapt the answer.
Well, it's more fun if I try to adapt it. All right. So, looking back at it now, what do you think one of the strengths of Severance is? Do you think it's the character design, the world building, the strength of the story?
Yes.
Good answer. All right. Fantastic. I wasn't sure how to adapt that question any further. So
I think Dan Erickson is a genius. I've said on other talk shows that I think that he's the equivalent. I think he's our generation's equivalent of like Rod Serling in Twilight Zone. I think the world building and the writing are incredible. And I'm a fan of the show as well. I think it's a really, really well done show in every aspect.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's very well cast, and I think one of the strengths for any show when it starts to grab my attention is that I like to look at the characters inside of the show and the design of the characters, and I don't mean the physical appearance. I mean how the characters are written and what are their flaws and what are their strengths, and how does this character interact with that character, and the way that they're written. To me, that bit of world building is crucial if it's gonna maintain my interest. And here we are, excited for thinking about a possibility of season 3. So
I think that's because Dan spent so many years, like 8, I believe, working on it prior to getting it produced. And because, he wrote the whole series before we even started. So he knows where it's going. He knows the answers. He knows how it ends. And it's not being, slapped together on the spot.
Yeah.
Which is why it takes so long to make.
That's fair. Yeah, it's kind of interesting to me when you see shows like that when they come to the table, not that it comes to the table ready to go, but you have this whole world laid out in front of you. I think that roadmap becomes a lot easier for not only in my mind, not only for the actors and the writers and directors to assist in putting this show together, but I think it also makes it extremely easy for the audience to pick up on that this is a crafted show. This is not, to use the term you use, this is not a slap together show.
Right. Oh, I totally agree. It's meticulously done. Really, I've actually never been a part of anything that's this meticulously done, and that's both Dan Erickson and Ben Stiller, and everybody else involved. It's very well thought out. Nothing's a mistake. Nothing's an accident. And the minutia and the tiny details, things that you don't even see in the costumes and the sets and the props, it's really pretty amazing. It's a pretty amazing set to be on.
Okay. Yeah, I think for me, one of the most interesting things about the show when it first started out is that when I heard that Ben Stiller was directing it, I was like, really? Ben Stiller's directing something? And I think unfortunately for myself, and I'll say it's unfortunate because I discredited it immediately. Oh, Ben Stiller he's a comedian. Why is he's
trying to do things. Escape from Donald.
Yeah, and that was the thing. I had overlooked the whole fact that Ben had directed a whole bunch of stuff, and as I started looking into it, I was like, oh, well, I'm an idiot. He actually directed a lot of stuff, and he's done really good with it. And then I watched this, and it's like, oh, well, I get to eat everything I thought about that. Not that Ben Stiller had to go out there and prove me wrong, but he went out there and proved me all kinds of wrong, and I couldn't be happier that he did.
I think he's just quieter about it than he is about his acting career. But he's a very good director.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that.
And very nice to work with. Very supportive.
That's cool. It's always nice to hear stories like that where you hear about an actor turned director who sometimes I've heard stories where sometimes those gentlemen can be a little more difficult to work for, but because they think that everybody's going to do things exactly how they do it. But it's also nice to hear stories like that where clearly he's got an understanding of the task at hand and is allowing you to do your job.
He also casts people that he thinks are very right for what he's doing, and then gives them free rein to do it. If something isn't what he wants, or if he wants you to try something different, he'll tell you. But he pretty much gives you free rein to bring what you bring to the table, because that's why he cast you.
That's nice.
And I think that comes from being an actor as well.
Yeah, he may be doing for you what maybe he wanted in another project, perhaps.
Quite possibly.
Maybe that's So okay. All right. Well, before we take a turn into some of the easier questions, the easier portions of the show, I'm going to ask you this:
the hard questions.
What's that?
These were the hard questions.
Ish.
Okay, then the easy ones are really going to be easy. This is great. The breeze.
Yeah. Well, we try. We try to make it so it's an enjoyable conversation, not a grill session for
Inquisition.
For what you're going. Exactly. We want you to have fun on the show. We want you to think about coming back at some point. So if I put you through an inquisition, nobody wants that.
Oh, well, so I'll go to the opening of a supermarket, so that you won't have much trouble getting me back.
Fair enough. Okay. All right. So let me ask you this. And this is purely an opinion question because this is kind of a hot button topic over the last couple of years. There's no doubt that AI is gaining momentum, and there's certainly an uptick in use of AIs for videos, even dialogue. So my question for you is AI a help or is it a hindrance? And if it's a help, how do we, in your opinion, make it something workable for moving forward in the movie business?
I personally think it's a hindrance. I'm not a fan of AI. I would rather see people practically do everything themselves. That's just my personal opinion.
No, I think that's a fair answer. Now, for all all openness and fairness, I'm not a fan of AI either. I think AI has its place if you're using it after it shouldn't. I don't think it should be used for creation of the
I think
item.
it's a slippery slope.
Yeah, I have less of an issue using AI for things that are already created and to help kind of like maybe like I have a program that I use um that helps me create from our interviews, sections that says, hey, maybe this one is the one you want to try to use. This one might have this 60-second window might have a little bit more grasp for the audience. It might catch their attention a little more. But that's it. That, in my opinion, and maybe I'm looking at this from a different light. That's already something that we've created. It's not something that's needs to be created. It's just helping me identify something from my creation.
I'm kind of a purist, though. I have to say that, I'm not even a fan of CGI and things like that. I'm a huge horror movie fan, and I'd rather see practical effects any day of the week. So,
You know what? Having grown up on George Lucas's Star Wars, and the practical effects that are used in that, I like practical effects. I prefer practical effects for most things. I think that
CGI has,
there are,
but I think it's overused.
and I would agree with you on that. I think CGI does have its place. Like anything else, it's like anything else when you're using a tool. It has its right places and it has its wrong places. You don't use a hammer everywhere, but when you need a hammer, that's the best thing for it. And by golly, it works great. And so there may be some things, where CGI works well, but I love the fact that even with CGI, that even though it's computer based, it still requires the smarts of a human behind the keyboard and the mouse to make that thing become real and become a thing, not just, talking into a microphone and telling it to create a thing.
Right. Because if you use a hammer where you need a screwdriver, you're going to break something.
I mean, I've done it. It doesn't really work that well. I can assure you of that. Usually ends up with a mess. So, but yeah, so I'm always, always curious, especially, when I talk with actors, I always like to know what their thoughts are on that, because it's a very changing landscape that we see in front of us, when it comes to movies. And that was one of the big reasons for the strike, is that the use of AI. And now we see that also affecting the video game, union, and what they're fighting for, and the use of AI voices. And I saw an ad the other day, where it was like, get paid to use your voice. And I was like, oh, and it was so that you record your voice into an AI trainer and then let the AI use your voice.
Right.
And I was like,
I do a lot of voice work, so I'm not a fan of AI doing voice work.
yeah, and I wouldn't expect you to be. And I wasn't a fan of that. I was like, no, I don't think I'll do that. It's I think that's so problematic, because what if somebody's voice is being used to voice something that's outside of their moral compass, with something
It's funny you said
something
that. I have a huge problem with on commercials and things now, where they where AI recreates actors who were dead and puts them into commercials and things. I have a huge problem with that.
that's just weird too.
Yeah, and how do you know they want to do that? They would have wanted to do that. I mean, yeah, I think it's odd.
That's even like, so I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I don't know if you can tell by some of the Star Wars stuff behind me,
I can't.
but even with Star Wars, like James Earl Jones gave Disney the right to use, in Lucasfilm, the right to use his voice in perpetuity for Darth Vader. And even at that, I'm like, I don't think I'm okay with that. I would rather see other voice actors come in, and no offense to the memory of James Earl Jones, he was phenomenal in many, many ways. But I mean, there's a lot of voice actors out there who do a very good Darth Vader, and couple of them, by the time you put them through the process machine so that it sounds like he's talking through a voice box and a filter and all those other things, if you can tell the difference, then I'm the Pope. So I guess we have a better chance now that the Pope's American, but
Yeah.
so. But anyway, it's just a thought I had and curiosity. So, but yeah, all right. So, Mark, it's suggestion time.
Okay.
And so, what are you reading or listening to that everyone else should know about or check out?
Let's see. What am I? Well, I watch a lot of television. So shows I'm watching now, I'm watching Hacks because Gene Smart is absolutely amazing and brilliant. So I love Hacks, and I love everything about Hacks, actually, the writing, the actors. And I'm watching Handmaid's Tale in its final season. I like that. I watched the show Silo on Apple TV. That's its third season, I believe, is about to come on. I like that a lot. I watch From. I think that's an interesting show. But nothing that I would say everybody in the world has to watch. There's so much out there. Watch what you want, read what you want, listen to what you want.
Okay.
Watch Severance.
Watch Severance for sure.
That's all I care about. Watch Severance.
Fair enough. Are you listening? Are not listening, but are you reading anything currently?
I am not reading anything currently.
Okay. Fair enough. Okay. Mark, we have hit the point where I need to ask you a silly question.
Oh, those were the serious ones I've been doing already.
And that's the scary part. If you think this is now the silly question.
This is a silly one. Okay, I'm ready.
I'm just announcing it as more silly, and it really ain't even at that. It's not even that silly. So I talked about my co-host Kathleen at the outset of the show. We were talking about a few different things, and Kathleen and her daughter were out and about one day, and somebody asked her daughter this question, but not Kathleen. And Kathleen thought it was a little bit rude because, well, you should never age out of this question, and it should always be asked to someone.
How old is her daughter?
Her daughter's 6.
Okay, so her daughter's a little kid. Okay,
yeah,
got it.
All right, so Marc Geller.
Yes.
What's your favorite dinosaur?
Oh, my favorite dinosaur is the flying one that begins with T. What do you call that? Pterodactyl.
Pterodactyl. Okay.
Pterodactyl. I like a pterodactyl.
Okay. I think you're only like the third person to ever say pterodactyl.
See that? I'm original almost. What's yours?
You're at least 33% original.
What's your favorite one?
I am a fan of Triceratops. And the reasoning behind that is I've said this on other shows is that growing up, I thought rhinos were really, really cool. And I still do. And I think that they're just magnificent beasts. They're just phenomenally made. And what's that?
Go ahead. I'll finish.
And so, they had the big horn, and I was like, oh, look, that's a rhino, and that's a Triceratops. That's a triple horn rhino. Okay, that's my favorite. And that's kind of where it went from.
I also like the one, I don't know what it's called, that has the big hood that it can open up and it spits. What's that called? The big fan opens up.
Yeah, the spitting one. It's a Dio.
I call it the showgirl dinosaur because it has that big fan that opens up around its head. Looks like
the jazz hands.
Showgirl.
The showgirl dinosaur. I like that. Okay.
It's like the Rockette dinosaur. But pterodactyl is still my favorite.
Okay. All right. Well, Mark, thank you for being on the show today. Where can our listeners go to find out more about you, your work, anything you've got coming up?
Pretty much everything I do, I post on my Instagram page. So I hope they will come follow me there. It's my name backwards. It's GELLER_MARC. So Geller_Mark. So come follow me there, and I post everything there that you could want to know about anything I might be doing if you have any interest in what I might be doing.
All right, very cool. And now I'll post that down in the show notes down below. People will be able to find that
Great.
and check you out from there. And you should. We follow him on socials, and it's a good follow. So have fun with
I'm
it,
very
guys.
interesting. I'm very interesting, aren't I?
I think so. That's why I have you on the show, because I thought you were interesting.
I
So
post a lot of fun Severance stuff too. So if they're Severance fans, they may like it as well.
exactly. There we go. All right, guys. So if you haven't already, following our show on YouTube is the single most important thing that you can do to ensure that we get more amazing guests like Marc Geller here today and have these great conversations for you to be able to listen to. So please consider following our show. It helps out more than we can ever really tell you. And go to Instagram, check out Mark's work as well. Give him a follow. And trust me, if you are a Severance fan, he's got some cool stuff on there. He's got some cool non-Severance stuff too. So it all balances out.
Speaking of which, before you sign off, if this interests anyone, I'm in a film that I think is a really good film that's streaming on Max now called A Different Man that stars Sebastian Stan. So I would recommend going to Max and watching A Different Man as well. I have a very small, but Sebastian Stan is wonderful in it.
Okay. I'll put a link for that as well in the show notes so that people can check that out as well. So yeah, a Different Man. Fantastic. All right, guys, thank you so much for checking out the FSF podcast today. Marc, thank you for being here and being part of our show. And may the force be with you as you continue to live long and prosper. Goodbye.
Bye.
Copyright 2025 FSF Podcast. Reference to any specific product or entity mentioned on this podcast does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by FSF Podcast. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. If you have any questions about this disclaimer, please contact us via email at info@fsfpodcast.com.